Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice is an action-adventure game developed and published by Ninja Theory. Hellblade was released on August 8, 2017 and is influenced by Celtic culture and Norse mythology. There are many wonderful things about the game, and as proof, Hellblade has won many awards including the BAFTA Awards. Today, I'm going to analyze the cert level within the first section of Hellblade. Now, the cert level is sectioned off into different sections leading up to the boss level with cert, and I'm going to be analyzing the level section by section in order to show some of the techniques that we use in designing the cert level. But first, I'm going to discuss a condition that Senua has since it plays a part within the game. Once you start the game, a warning appears that mentions that there will be representation of psychosis. Players will hear one distinct narrating voice that will narrate why Senua is here in the first place. The other voices that the player will hear are in the background, and there are many of them. I will touch on these voices later.
Surt, the fire giant, has answered. He comes from a land older than mankind, and the Northmen call upon his...
When the doors of Surt's level open, the players will walk through this tiny little corridor that would lead them to a vast open area. This is ideal because they're going from a tight confined space to a very open and bright space. As you can tell from me playing this game, you can see that there were paths within this level that I follow. This is because that is how the designers designed this level. They included a lot of nature next to the paths in order to show me this is where you need to go. The designers and developers have also encouraged players to kind of go off the beaten path. And when I mean that, sometimes in these levels there's usually like just a path off to the right or left that would take you to a hidden lore stone. This lore stone is a collectible item featured within this game. So when Senua goes up to this stone and focuses on it, then another character will tell Senua almost a backstory about Norse mythology. Now usually these corridors will lead you to a giant, almost circular area. Within this area, you will see a door or a gate that will sometimes have fire next to it, so it draws your attention, and you will see two ruined symbols on the door. Now, in this circular area, it signifies to the player that you are going to have to fight enemies in this area. This is a nice touch, so then players know when to expect combat. Since this game, from what I have played, does not have random enemies appearing out of nowhere. Usually, the enemies will appear within this area and will let you know when the fighting will begin once Senua draws her blade. Now, once the player has Senua focused on the door, then Senua is expected to go find those ruins. And those ruins be found within that area of the level. So as you can see here, I am walking around trying to find the ruins within, obviously, the nature and within the level. Now, when the player is close to one of the symbols, then a bunch of tiny little red symbols will appear around Senua and above Senua. This is a wonderful design that I especially love because it helps the player focus on just that area to find what they're looking for, instead of expecting the player to run around and find the ruin symbol within a matter of minutes or seconds. Now, this section of the level is almost one of my favorites after going back and kind of analyzing this level, because first off, you start off walking through this little corridor path that is very dark, very animate. Leaves a lot to my imagination about why are these people stuck in this island. But this is probably one of my favorite parts, is climbing up these stairs and you see that giant fire within the distance. This kind of entices me and also tells the player that that is where Cert resides. So this is a very lovely, what they would call a weenie, because it draws your attention, kind of, this is where you need to go. Keep going this way, which is very lovely. Once you hit that door, you're hit with more combat. And that's one thing, another thing I love about this game is they section the combat off, so you're not just walking through, kind of dying in certain sections. Because the whole point of this game is if you die too many times, then your save in this game is deleted. Now, for these doors, the player needs to find a stone that will activate a fire vision thing. I don't know how to describe it. What's very interesting is that usually these stones are away from the door. Could be like in this stone, it's just kind of up the hill, which is very nice because it's on a different elevation. So it kind of draws the player in since there's a difference in height. Now, once the player has Senua activate this stone, it gets very interesting because this corridor changes from just having nature kind of form the paths. You have flames and you have ash people guiding the player where the exit is, even though the voices that you hear are saying, hey, that's the wrong way, or you'll never make it in time. Now, this is the second stone that you have to activate, and as you can see, like I said before, it's on a different elevation. And what I find also very interesting is that if you look at the ground, you will see it kind of pulsating with the fire, which kind of almost helps guide the player to the stone, kind of saying that this is the correct way. What's also very interesting is that they place this fire kind of off the side of the path to signify players that this is where you need to go in order to reach the stone. Now, for the third section, what is very interesting is that the door, instead of walking up and seeing it right away, it's kind of off to the side where you immediately see it. And another thing is that on the ground that I was just looking at, you see a pulsating kind of fire, which is a little bit of a spoiler on how to find the R symbol. And I've already played this, so I kind of knew where to go. And I also, since I'm kind of discussing more about the level, I'm not going to take time and really fully. But again, you are surrounded by little red symbols telling you that you're in the right area. And for the second symbol, what is very interesting is that on the ground, it gives you a little spoiler, a little sneak peek when you first enter the level, which is very nice because they put it in a spot where you never would have think to have looked for it. Now, I remember when I first played this, I had no clue where it was to begin with, and I was very lost, and I had to look it up. Now, the combat in this section is a little unexpected because the past sections of the level have been following almost like a formula, being the player finds the door, then there's a combat sequence, and then the player has to find the symbols to open the door, and then it goes on. But this time it was the player found the door that they were supposed to leave, found another door to find the ruins, and then it was combat to leave. And this happens all within this kind of heightened moment when the player is trying to escape before dying. Now, this fourth section of Cert's level is, you could almost say, completely different than the past three sections that you have seen in this video, because the designers decided to mess around with elevation. Now, in the last section, there was a bit of play with elevation that you saw when the player has to go through the building, like climb up it just to find the R symbol. So it kind of gives us a sneak peek to this, but still, it's completely different. You have to go through these damaged buildings to find these symbols. You have to go up a watchtower. The design idea of messing with elevation during this section is a wonderful idea because this is the last section before Senua has to fight up against Cert. And messing with elevation adds to the feeling of it's almost the pivotal point of the level, and I'm assuming that's what the designers wanted. I don't think many players will really notice this little minor detail unless you go back and really analyze the level. Now I'm going to use this time while I'm kind of running around during this section and finding all the symbols to talk about the voices that you hear within this level. So one of the voices that you hear from the very beginning is, I guess you would say, a narrator, because she kind of gives backstory on why Senua is here in the first place, why she's on this journey to Helheim. The other voices that you hear just appear in and out, and the voices have different tones to them. Some of them are very angry, mocking kind of way, and some of them are just kind of like normal voices, I would say, like not really much feeling. And these voices play an important part because during combat, if someone's behind you, they say, "Look out!" And that tells anyone that there's someone about to hit her from behind, and it's just a great element. And as well as doing that, the voices tell you if you're close to focus. The voices add another layer of how to guide the player. Now, an interesting element that's part of the boss section for this level is the lighting. Because in the last couple sections, whenever you face off against an enemy, the lighting gets a little dark, which is very nice to kind of signify that there is danger. But for this level, you have the lighting of the fire, but also the dark lighting of you're fighting an enemy. So it kind of creates this nice balance of almost a light and dark situation. Now I'm going to wrap up this video while I am walking back to the entrance/exit for this level. Now, since we're walking back, I would say that the structure of the level is semi-linear because it's linear in the sense of once you enter the room, but you have two options to pick. It's either the cert level or the other level, where there are two levels to go by, and you're in this hub, and then you kind of branch off from there. So this is semi-linear since it gets linear when you're in here, but outside of this level, it is not super linear. Now, this level helps guide the player by using light, by the voices. The designer for the level, or designers, did a really wonderful job in guiding the player, especially using the corridors, because sometimes in games it may feel like a little boring to go down these corridors, but for this one, and since the corridors feel like you're entering a village, and so the whole lighting changes when you're on the way back to kind of the hub of the game, in the first part of the game, because it's like a dusk situation. It kind of gives this cooling off time for the player, and that's exactly what this time is meant to do, is kind of de-stress the player and to let them go back. Then as soon as they get back, it kind of intensifies. And this is where then the player faces off against more enemies, and this is also the point where the difficulty level goes up, because you already managed one section. Now you mastered that, you're moving on up.